Hey guys! Tonight we're stepping straight into a world that smells of damp straw, wood smoke, and unwashed bodies, where the air is thick with the stench of manure and boiled cabbage, and the only thing standing between you and the cold is a rough wool tunic that hasn't been cleaned since last Michaelmas. You're not a noble, not even a merchant. You're a medieval peasant man, and you probably won't survive this. There's no romance in the rolling green fields here. Your back is already aching from dawn to dusk labor. Your stomach is growling from a diet of thin pottage and coarse bread. And the only way you'll make it to winter is if your lord doesn't raise your taxes, your crops don't rot, and you don't get caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before the first streak of dawn, long before the cock crows. The chill is biting in the little timber-framed hut you share with your wife, 3 children, and a goat that sleeps in the corner to keep it from freezing outside. The thatch above your head lets in the occasional drip from last night's rain, and the packed earth floor feels cold and gritty beneath your bare feet. You grope for the single wooden cup of yesterday's watered-down ale, take a sip, and it's already gone sour. The day ahead is fixed, the rhythm of your life as unyielding as the feudal chain binding you to this patch of land. Your home is one smoky room, walls daubed with mud and straw, and a small hearth that smolders overnight, but never fully warms the space. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof, so the air is always hazy with soot. Every breath carries the taste of smoke, and your eyes sting before you even step outside. You slip on your rough-spun tunic, scratch at the fleas in the seams, and tie your belt made from a length of braided hemp. The belt isn't just for holding your clothes in place, it carries your knife, your only real tool, besides the worn hoe and wooden plow you'll use later. Outside, the village is still half asleep, shrouded in mist. The first sounds you hear are the muffled bleats of sheep penned behind wattle fences, the creak of a cartwheel from somewhere down the lane, and the thump of someone splitting kindling. The air smells of damp earth and pig dung. In the distance, the manor house looms, a squat stone building, not grand like the castles in the stories, but solid enough to remind you who owns every inch of the land you till. That man, your lord, might not know your name, but he owns your body's labor for life. You trudge toward the strip of field you tend in the open field system, long, narrow bands of tilled earth divided by low ridges. These aren't your fields, they belong to the Lord, but you work them as part of your rent. The soil clings heavy to your worn leather shoes, and you think about how come harvest you'll owe a hefty share of everything you grow. Failure to deliver could mean fines, the loss of your rights to farm, or worse. The wind picks up, rattling the bare branches overhead, and you pull your hood tighter around your face. As you walk, your mind wanders to the freedom you've heard about in distant towns. People say some men there work for wages, buy their own bread, even choose their trade. But for you bound by villanage, there's no leaving without your lord's permission, and he's not likely to grant it. Running away is possible, yes, but dangerous. If caught, you could be whipped, fined into ruin, or branded. The dream of freedom is like the warmth of the sun in winter, nice to imagine, but never enough to live on. The day's first task is clearing weeds from the barley field. You bend low knees in the damp soil and pull until your fingers ache. The smell of earth is rich and heavy, and the rhythm of the work is almost hypnotic, broken only by the occasional caw of a crow overhead. Your stomach growls. Breakfast will be whatever's left from last night, a crust of rye bread hard enough to chip a tooth dipped into thin cabbage broth. The bread is dark, dense, and full of gritty bran that grinds against your molars. You chew slowly because there's no telling when you'll eat again today. In moments like this, you feel the weight of the seasons pressing on you. Every task is a step in a cycle you can't escape: sow, weed, harvest, pay, repeat. The year is measured not in months, but in feast days, not in hours, but in bells from the church tower. The priest speaks often of heaven, and you think maybe that's the point. Life here is so hard that paradise has to be somewhere else. But even as you settle into the familiar rhythm of hoe and breath, your mind lingers on what's ahead: the labor owed to the Lord's domain, the repairs to your hut before winter, the uncertainty of the weather, the whispers of plague in nearby villages. You can feel it in your bones. This year might be harder than the last. And for a medieval peasant man like you, harder can mean the difference between life and death. You work until the pale sun finally breaks through the low clouds, weak and watery, offering no real warmth. Your back protests with each bend, each pull of the hoe, but there's no stopping, not when every weed you leave behind steals food from your own table. You glance up at the tree line where the woods begin dense and dark. That forest is the Lord's hunting ground, strictly forbidden to you. You're not allowed to take wood to trap rabbits, to even gather fallen branches without permission. The game there is for noble sport, not peasant pots. The irony burns: the rabbits hop freely in the shadow of the trees, while your children go hungry. Around mid-morning, you take a break, not because you can, but because you must. Your muscles ache, and your hands are red from the cold. You squat in the furrows, pull out a small bundle wrapped in cloth, more bread, a few raw onions, maybe a sliver of cheese if you're lucky. You chew slowly each bite, a reminder that your diet never changes. Fresh meat is rare, something you might see only a few times a year, usually on feast days. Most days it's grains, legumes, and whatever vegetables you can coax from the garden: turnips, leeks, maybe a cabbage. You drink more of the sour ale. Water from the village well is risky, and you've seen what happens when someone drinks from a stagnant ditch. Your neighbor Thomas trudges over from his strip of land. His face is weathered like yours, his hands calloused. He nods a greeting, then mutters about the steward's visit last week. The steward works for the Lord, making sure the rents are paid and the work is done. Rumor has it he's planning another tally, soon counting livestock, measuring fields, and checking whether peasants owe extra dues. You and Thomas exchange a look. There's nothing to be done but hope you're not short on your obligations. Hope in your world is a currency almost as scarce as silver. The break ends quickly. The rest of the morning is spent repairing the plowshare. It's made of wood with a small iron tip, and every season it wears down faster than you can afford to replace it. You kneel in the mud, tightening the bindings with strips of rawhide, praying it will last until the fields are turned. Iron is expensive and controlled by smiths in the nearest town 2 days' walk from here. Without a good plow, the soil will clump and harden, making the barley and rye suffer before they've even begun to grow. By midday, the church bell tolls. It's not a call to rest. It's a call to work the domain, the Lord's own fields. This labor is compulsory, a part of your rent. You join a line of men heading toward the best land in the village, the dark, fertile soil kept for the manor. Here the work is watched closely by the bailiff, a man with a sharp eye and a sharper tongue. He shouts orders, makes you redo furrows if they're not straight enough, and isn't above striking someone with the flat of his staff for working too slowly. There's no pay, no thanks. This is feudal duty, unpaid, unquestioned, unavoidable. The sun is directly overhead, casting short shadows. Sweat beads on your forehead, despite the chill. The soil here is heavier, the work harder. You push the plow behind a pair of oxen guiding the blade, while another man prods the beasts forward. The oxen move slowly, their hooves sinking deep. The plowshare catches on stones, jolting your arms. Every muscle strains. You grit your teeth and keep going because slowing down means the bailiff's glare, and worse, the lash of his tongue. In the distance, you can see the manor house again. From here, it's almost picturesque. The stone walls, the arched doorway, the smoke curling from the chimney. But you know what lies inside. The Lord's table is always set with meat, pork, venison, poultry served on silver platters. His family drinks wine from goblets, while you drink ale from a wooden cup. He sleeps on a bed stuffed with feathers beneath fine linen sheets, while your own bed is a sack of straw crawling with fleas. The contrast is so stark it feels almost like a joke, but it's not funny when you're living it. Afternoon stretches on and the damp creeps into your bones. A light drizzle starts turning the soil into sticky clay that clings to your boots. The oxen huff their sides slick with sweat, and the plow jerks more with each step. You work until the bell rings again, signaling the end of the day's labor on the domain. But your work isn't over. You still have your own small garden to tend the goats, to feed, and repairs to make before nightfall. The walk back to your hut is slow. The village lane is little more than churned mud scattered with puddles. Children dart past, chasing each other barefoot despite the cold. A few women stand at the well drawing water and gossiping about the Reeve's wife, who supposedly wears a brooch of silver proof they say that she's hoarding from the tithe. The air smells faintly of smoke and damp wool. You pass by the church, its wooden door swollen from the rain. Inside, the priest is preparing for evening prayers, the only warm light in the village. At home, your wife is mending a torn sleeve by the hearth, the goat chewing quietly in the corner. The children are huddled together, sharing a wooden bowl of stew so thin you can see the bottom. You sit down heavily, feeling every year of your 30-something life, though you know most men here won't live past 45. You take your turn with the stew, careful not to spill. It's hot at least, and for a moment you let yourself feel grateful. But even in this small moment of warmth, your mind flickers to the future. Winter is coming, and with it hunger, sickness, and the gnawing uncertainty of survival. Being a medieval peasant man means always balancing on the edge of debt, of famine, of illness, never knowing which will come first to claim you. You shift on the bench, listening to the rain tap against the thatch, and you know tomorrow will be the same. You sleep light and badly, a man trained by necessity to wake at the slightest change in the hearth's glow or the goat's hooves shifting in the corner. When the embers fall to black cold, gnaws at your toes through the straw tick, and you draw your rough cloak up to your chin nose full of the sour hay smell. Your wife turns once, twice, then stills. A child coughs a thin, rattling cough that makes you count breaths until you're sure it's only a chill and not something that will carry him into the next world before the thaw. You whisper a prayer, because that is what men like you can do when there is nothing else to be done, make bargains with heaven, and hope someone listens. In the morning, the village stirs, as if pulled by one long rope. You share a heel of bread rubbed with garlic, and a small clay cup of ale that tastes of the barrel. The bread scrapes your gums, and for a second you miss a front tooth you cracked 2 summers ago, biting a stone baked into a loaf. No money for a smith to pull it clean, so it broke jagged and stayed. You rinse with a mouthful of ale and spit into the ash by the hearth, then shoulder your day like a yoke. Work first, then obligations, then, if luck is kind, sleep. Obligations arrive before you do. On the lane outside, the reeve and 2 jurors from the manor court stand with tallies in hand, notches cut like little open mouths waiting to be fed. They greet you by name and by debt, because on the manor you are as much your dues as your person. There is talk of boon work days coming soon, those extra stints of labor at harvest. When the Lord demands hands on his grain, your own field be hanged. The reeve says the domain needs ditching before the spring rains. You nod because nodding is safer than speaking, and he scratches a mark you feel on your skin like a whip. The manorial court is set for Friday, and already your stomach tightens. You've been hauled there for small things before letting your pigs wander into the Lord's meadow, taking brushwood from the forbidden copse, failing to show with your full toolkit on a day of called labor. Each time a fine. Fines are like mice, one is nothing but they breed in corners, and you cannot trap them all. Sometimes the court reads out names with the rhythm of a litany. A parish of missteps, Alice, who brewed ale too weak, John, who sold wheat without leave, Matthew, who shirked the plow, and you, who cut peat beyond your allotment because your hearth would have gone cold. The steward sits like a winter sun behind a table pen scraping, and the clerk's wax seals harden on debts that never soften. You try to keep your head down to live inside the small border of your rights. You are by law a man with duties to render days of labor, to pay tallage when it's demanded to give a hen at Martinmas and a lamb at Easter, to tithe the 10th sheaf to the church. There is a word that follows you like a shadow when you pass under the lich gate or stand in the field Merchet. If your daughter ever marries, you will pay for the privilege of her leaving the manor, as if love itself were a coin struck with the Lord's face. If you die, the best beast will be his, as Harriet a death dues that feels like a thumb on the chest of grief. You tell yourself it is simply the shape of the world, the way the river turns around the hill, not unfair so much as fixed. But sometimes, late when the embers go blue, you allow yourself the small sin of thinking it unfair. The church bell marks the hours that do not belong to you. On Sundays, you stand with the other men, shoulder to shoulder, the village pressed together like grain in a sheaf. The priest preaches on patience, on humility, on the crown waiting beyond the veil, if only you endure. You study the wall painting of St. Christopher, striding a river with the Christ child on his shoulder, and wonder what it might be to carry God and find the burden light. For a breath or two, incense and song scrub the week's grime off your mind, and you see yourself as part of a great order, kings and nobles above peasants and beasts below heaven, beyond them all. Then you remember the tithe due and the hole in the roof, and your knees ache on the stone floor. At home, the small economies of survival rule every movement. You straighten the wattle fence with careful hands, each stake and twig placed where the goat cannot nose through. You patch the thatch with straw you bartered for in winter, pushing fistfuls into the roof's thin places with a hooked stick. Your wife scours the pot with handfuls of sand, saves every pinch of salt like treasure, and hoards onion skins for the faintest trace of dye. When you have moments with your eldest boy, you show him the cupped way to hold a chick, how to read the sky for rain by the taste of the wind, how to set a snare that won't catch the Lord's eyes. You teach him to bow just enough to speak when spoken to, and to keep his feet away from the manor fish pond unless he wants to feel the bailiff's staff. This is the curriculum for men like you, the lore of staying out of trouble, and the craft of squeezing sustenance out of stubborn ground. There is talk in the alehouse of towns, those places where men wear shoes every day and never see a field. Someone says, if you stay a year and a day within town walls, you are free. The phrase repeats like a charm, a year and a day. You turn it over in your mind the way you'd turn a smooth stone in your pocket. Freedom sounds like a bell on a clear day, pure and impossible. You measure the leagues to the nearest market town against the distance between your duty and your desire. One is miles, the other is a chain. Chains, you know, hold faster than miles, So you drink the thin ale and nod and say, maybe in another life, and the men laugh the laugh of those who would rather not cry. When the weather breaks and the road dries to hard ruts, the peddler arrives with a pack of wonders on his back pins that shine like saints' tears, kerchiefs dyed like sunset knives, with handles carved to fit your palm, a whistle for a child that sings like a bird. You watch your daughter touch a scrap of blue cloth and withdraw her hand as if it burned. You ask the price because asking costs nothing, and the peddler names a sum that costs everything. You buy a length of thread and a new whetstone and let the better things pass by like swallows at evening. It is a kind of wealth to know what you cannot have and to bless it as it goes. Disease moves like a rumor no one wants to repeat. Sometimes it starts with a child's fever that won't break a mother's cough, that shakes her bones, a rash, the color of spilled wine, a swelling that rises angry and purple along a jaw. You have seen men strong as ash trees bend to an unseen wind and fail to rise. The priest carries oil and a book. You carry water and prayers. When sickness leaves, it takes something with it, an appetite, a child, a piece of your wife's laughter you will not hear again. You learn the art of not asking why, because why is a hole no rope reaches. You learn the other art too, the one that keeps men upright doing the next thing. Dig the ditch, mend the shoe, cut the rye, stir the pot, kiss the child, sleep if sleep will have you. War is a story you hear before it arrives. Riders passed last week with a banner bright as flame, and the reeve's voice has a new edge the way a scythe sings after a fresh sharpening. You know what war does to villages like yours. It eats grain where it stands, drinks ale from barrels you counted for winter, tramples vegetable gardens under hooves and leaves behind nothing but hoof prints and a broken gate. If your lord marches, he may take men with him, and if he does, he needs tax and fodder and meat. You own none of those things outright, but war borrows without asking. You pray the riders were just passing through the way a storm cloud sometimes threatens and then drifts off to drown another field. On Friday, you stand under the manor's eaves while rain stair-steps from the roof, waiting your turn in the court. The steward's table smells of damp parchment and beeswax. When your name is called, you step forward and lift your cap. The charge is read, you cut brushwood beyond your right in the east copse. You did. Your children were cold, and the wind had a knife in it. You say little. The fine is set small because the reeve knows you show when called, and your furrows run straight. Small is not nothing. You bow. The wax is pressed. It is done. You walk home with the odd taste of relief and loss in your mouth, as if you had sold a memory for a coin. Night returns with its familiar weight. You settle by the hearth, stretch the ache from your back, and peel a turnip with a knife so worn it has become your hand's memory. Your wife hums a tune her mother hummed, and for a moment you see time not as a grindstone but as a wheel that brings the same small comforts around, again fire food, the warm rake of a child's hair under your palm, the rasp of your wife's thread through cloth. You think not for long about what it is to be a man here. Strength is useful, but endurance is holy. You measure yourself not by the height of your voice, but by the quiet length of your patience. You know where to stand. When the bailiff walks by, which words fit inside your mouth without damage, which promises to keep to the dead, the promise to bury them proper, to remember them on their day, to hold their names like seeds in the pocket of your heart. You feed the fire a last armful of sticks, pull the door bar into its notch, and let darkness come in its own time. Outside, the rain has stopped. Somewhere an owl calls, and the goats shift on their hooves. You lie down in the straw tick, and the fleas find you old friends that never forget your name. You breathe the smoky air, count the bell strokes drifting from the church tower, and know that morning will come because it always does, and it will look very much like today. You press your palm to your chest and feel the dull drum of your heart, a stubborn little mill that keeps turning grain into days. You think of the town and its promise of the forest, and its traps of the manor, and its dues of your children, and their thin wrists, and of the strange, fierce tenderness you feel for this narrow life that holds you like a rough hand holds a cup. Then the hand of sleep closes over yours, and you follow it down. The pale light of dawn leaks through the thatch again, drawing you back into the same narrow groove of habit. You hear the goat bleating softly, your wife stirring at the hearth, and somewhere outside the steady rhythm of a neighbor's axe striking wood. The cold is sharper today, pinching at your ears and creeping down your spine. You stand, stretch until your back cracks, and roll your shoulders against the ache that never fully leaves. Another day waits outside the door, identical in shape to the one before, but carrying its own hidden edges. Before you step out, you wrap a strip of cloth around your neck, more to keep the smoke from your breath from fogging in your face than to warm you. In the corner, the children are still huddled together, eyes half-lidded, clinging to those last minutes of warmth. You give your eldest boy a nudge and tell him to fetch water from the well. He groans, but you know he'll do it. There's no choice. You walk out with him into the lane, the mud frozen into ridges that press against the soles of your shoes. Frost clings to the tips of the wattle fences, and the breath of the cattle in the byre rises like ghostly clouds. At the well, a small line has already formed 3 women and an old man with a cart. The rope creaks as the bucket is hauled up, droplets freezing before they hit the ground. Your boy's hands are red by the time he brings the brimming bucket back to the hut. You tell him to warm them near the hearth, but he just shrugs and pours the water into the earthen jar in the corner. Toughness is learned here, and quickly. Today's work is hedging. The Lord's strips must be kept separate from the common pasture, and that means weaving thorn and branch into a living fence that will hold for years. The hedge keeps cattle where they should be, and keeps wandering animals out of the Lord's grain, but it's your back that bends to make it so. You work with Thomas again, the 2 of you, cutting lengths of hazel and willow, driving stakes into the damp ground and lacing them with thorny brush. Every time you grip the thorn, you feel its bite through the calluses. The blood beads and dries, leaving thin red lines along your palms like a map. The bailiff passes once in the morning, his horse picking its way along the muddy lane. He doesn't speak, just nods as if to say he's seen you working. That nod matters. A man caught idling might find himself on the wrong side of the manor court. When he's gone, Thomas mutters about the last man fined for loitering, and the fine was more than the worth of the sheep he'd been guarding. You both laugh under your breath, because here laughter is the only tax you don't pay. By midday, the mist has lifted enough to show the fields beyond the village flat, and bare but for the stubble left from last season's harvest. In a few weeks, you'll be plowing again, walking the same furrows over and over until your shoulders burn. For now you keep weaving the hedge, the rhythm so steady it feels like the day might last forever. A robin perches on a branch above, head cocked, as if it can't understand why men would bother building a wall they could just walk around. When the work bell sounds, you head home for the noon meal. It's nothing more than yesterday's pottage reheated, but it fills your stomach enough to push you back into the fields. Your wife has saved a scrap of salted pork from the last feast day, and she slips it into the pot while you wash your hands in the cold water outside. The smell alone feels like a luxury, though the meat will be gone in a few bites. You thank her quietly. Here thanks are worth more than promises. In the afternoon, you tend your own small strip of garden behind the hut. The soil is hard from frost, but you turn it anyway, breaking clumps with the heel of your boot. Every handful of earth is a gamble. You never know if the next season will bless you with enough to eat or punish you with blight. You plant early leeks and onions, knowing the frost might nip them, but hoping the gamble will pay. Beside the garden, the goat shifts impatiently in its pen, and you fork in hay while checking the fence for gaps. From the road, you hear the clatter of a cart. It's the miller carrying grain for grinding. His cart's iron-rimmed wheels crush the frozen mud, leaving deep grooves. He tips his cap as he passes. The miller has his own burdens tolls to the Lord upkeep for the mill, but his life is at least removed from the soil. Sometimes you wonder if he sleeps easier, or if every man here carries the same restless weight in different shapes. As evening falls, smoke threads up from every roof in the village. The sky turns the color of old wool, and the cold deepens until your breath feels solid. You carry the last armful of firewood inside, stacking it carefully by the hearth. The children cluster close, their cheeks red from the chill. Your wife serves the evening meal, and you eat with the slow rhythm of tired men speaking little. The goat's soft chewing fills the quiet, and the fire throws long shadows on the walls. After supper, you mend a length of harness leather by the dim light, the thread biting into your fingers. It's a simple repair, but one that might mean the difference between a working plow and a broken one come spring. Tools here are more precious than coins. Without them, your labor is nothing but bent spine and empty hands. Before sleep, you step outside for a moment. The air is sharp enough to cut, and the village lies still, except for the faint glow from the church window. Above the stars are sharp and cold, unblinking in the black. You breathe it in, the smell of wood smoke and frost, and you feel both trapped and tethered to the land, to the people, to a way of life that will not loosen its grip. You duck back inside, bar the door, and let the darkness take the rest of the world away. The morning comes with the sound of rain on the thatch, a steady hiss that tells you the lane will be a churned mess before noon. You rise anyway. There's no such thing as a weather delay when you're a peasant. The goat complains from its corner, the children murmur in their sleep, and your wife is already coaxing the embers back into a flame. You pull on your tunic, still damp from yesterday, and step into the smoke-filled air of the single room you call home. The smell is a mixture of ash, wet wool, and cabbage, a scent that has become the backdrop to your life. Today's task takes you to the common pasture. The village's cattle and sheep graze here, watched over in turns by the men who live within earshot of the church bell. It's your turn to watch them, and while that sounds like rest, it's anything but. You shoulder your staff and make your way through the mud, herding the animals toward the higher ground, where the grass isn't waterlogged. The rain has turned the air heavy, and the damp seeps into your bones. You keep a wary eye on the tree line. Wolves have been seen in the area, and though they rarely come near the village, hunger makes bold creatures of them. As you walk, you think about the pasture itself, a patch of land that isn't anyone's and yet belongs to everyone. The commons are a lifeline grazing for animals, a place to gather firewood, the source of the reeds your wife weaves into baskets. But it's also under constant threat. The Lord could enclose it at any time, fencing it off for his own sheep. You've heard of other villages losing their commons, and each time the story is told, the ending is the same: more hunger, more debt, more men leaving in the night. You can't imagine where you'd go if it happened here, but you know you'd have to go somewhere. By mid-morning, the rain eases into a mist, and you gather the cattle into a tighter group. A younger boy from the village comes running with news the steward will be riding through this afternoon. That means everyone needs to be seen working, and no one can be caught idle. You glance at the animals, safe for the moment, and decide to use the lull to check the pasture fence. Sections of it are sagging, and you pull them back into place, weaving branches through the gaps. Your hands are stiff from the cold, but you work quickly, better to be found mending a fence than standing still. When the steward finally appears, flanked by 2 armed men, you're ready. You stand by the fence staff in hand and offer a nod. He barely glances at you, too busy counting heads, both cattle and men. You've learned that in his eyes there's little difference. Men and animals are both measured in terms of how much they can produce, how much labor they can give before they wear out. He rides on his horse, splashing through the mud, and you let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. The afternoon is spent moving the animals back toward the village, where the ground is less treacherous. You pass the smithy on the way, and the sharp, rhythmic clang of the hammer on iron rings out into the mist. The blacksmith is one of the few men here who works for coin, though much of his payment still comes in the form of grain or goods. You watch the sparks fly from his anvil, thinking how much you'd give for a stronger plow blade or a decent knife. But iron is dear, and your needs always outrun your means. Back at home, the rain has soaked through the thatch in one corner, dripping into a clay bowl placed on the floor. Your wife gives you a look that says she's been waiting for you to notice. You promise to fix it, though you both know the repair will be temporary at best. Thatch needs constant care, and every winter tests it harder than the last. You eat your evening meal with the sound of the drip in the background, each drop a reminder of the work still waiting. After supper, you sit by the fire and whittle a new handle for your hoe. The old one split last week, and you've been making do with a temporary fix. The wood shavings curl to the floor, and you keep your hands busy while your mind drifts. You think of the younger men who've left for the towns, chasing the promise of freedom after a year and a day. Some return with stories of crowded streets, markets full of goods from far-off lands, and work that doesn't break the body quite so quickly. But they also speak of high-rent sickness that spreads faster than the wind and the constant pull of the manor back home. Freedom, it seems, is a harder bargain than it sounds. When the fire burns low, you spread the straw in your bed, trying to shake loose the worst of the fleas. The children are already asleep, their breathing steady in the dark. You lie down beside your wife, listening to the wind outside and the faint creak of the timbers in the roof. You know tomorrow will bring another round of labor, another set of small battles against hunger, cold, and the endless demands of the manor. But for now, in this brief stillness, you let your eyes close and surrender to the kind of sleep only exhaustion can bring. The next day dawns brittle and clear, the kind of cold that makes the inside of your nose sting with the first breath outside. You can see your own breath curling in the air as you step into the lane, the frost crunching under your worn shoes. The sky is a pale wash of gray-blue, promising no warmth, but at least no rain. You shift your shoulders, still sore from the long hours of herding yesterday, and head toward the small strip of field that needs turning before the ground hardens for good. The plow waits where you left it, leaning against the low fence, the wood pale from years of weather, the iron tip dull and nicked. You'll have to make do sharpening it with your whetstone before starting. The oxen blink at you from the pen, their breath steaming in the crisp air. You speak to them softly as you fasten the yoke, because even a stubborn beast responds better to a calm hand. The sound of the leather straps tightening is familiar, almost comforting, and you lead them out into the field. The work is slow at first. The ground is stiff, and the plow jerks every time it catches on a hidden root or stone. You guide the blade into the earth, feeling the strain in your arms and back with each furrow. Your breath comes in steady bursts, white clouds puffing in the cold. You don't think about the end of the field. You think only about the next step, the next slice of soil turned over, because thinking of the whole task at once would crush your spirit before you began. By mid-morning, the sun is a pale disk overhead, giving light without heat. You pause to wipe your brow, though it's more from effort than sweat. The wind has picked up, rattling the bare branches at the edge of the field. A few crows wheel overhead, their calls sharp against the quiet. You take a swallow from your leather flask, the ale flat and warm, but it wets your throat enough to keep you going. As you work, your thoughts drift to the harvest just past. It was meager, too much rain in the summer, not enough sun to ripen the grain. The store in your loft is smaller than you'd like, and you've already begun to cut portions thinner to make it last. You know you're not alone in this. Thomas lost nearly a third of his yield to mildew, and old Robert's field was flattened in a single night's storm. You've all seen bad years before, but they never get easier. Hunger is a patient wolf. It doesn't rush, it waits. It circles the edges of the village until the weakest falter. You drive the plow forward again, the oxen snorting as they pull. The smell of turned soil rises damp and earthy, carrying with it the faint hope that next year might be better. You tell yourself that all you can do is prepare the ground, plant the seed, and pray. Everything else, the rain, the sun, the pests, is in the hands of God. The priest says that labor is holy, that to till the soil is to join in the Creator's work. Some days you believe him. Other days it feels like you're pushing against the world's indifference with nothing but your bare hands. Around noon your wife arrives with a small basket. Bread, a wedge of hard cheese, and a handful of dried beans boiled into a thick paste. She sets it on the fence and stands beside you for a while, her cloak pulled tight against the wind. You don't talk much, there's no need. The food is gone quickly, and you savor the cheese, its sharpness cutting through the monotony of bread. She takes the empty basket and heads back toward the village, her figure shrinking against the wide open field. The afternoon stretches long, each furrow a mirror of the one before. Your arms ache, your legs feel heavy, but you keep going until the light begins to fade. The sky turns a deeper blue, and the first thin sliver of moon appears. You guide the oxen back to their pen, unyoke them, and rub their necks where the leather chafed. They've worked as hard as you today, and you murmur a quiet thanks before scattering hay for them to eat. Back at the hut, the warmth from the fire seeps into your chilled bones. Your wife is stirring a pot over the hearth, the smell of onions and herbs filling the air. The children sit cross-legged on the floor, playing with a small bundle of sticks and stones, making up stories you can only half follow. You sink onto the bench, feeling the weight of the day settle into your muscles. After supper, you check the plow again, running your fingers along the iron tip, feeling for cracks. You think about the repairs it will need before spring repairs. You can't make without the blacksmith's help, and that will cost more than you'd like to part with. Still, without the plow, there will be no planting, and without planting, there will be no harvest. It's the same truth you've lived by all your life: spend what you must to keep the work going, or lose everything. When the fire burns low, you bank the embers for the night and lie down in the straw bed. The sound of the wind outside is steady, almost like a lullaby. You close your eyes, knowing that tomorrow will demand the same labor, the same endurance, and perhaps, if fortune allows, the same small moments of warmth that make it bearable. The next morning starts not with the bell from the church, but with the clatter of hooves on the lane outside. You push yourself upright in the straw heart, quickening for a moment, until you hear voices, men from the manor calling out for laborers. You already know what this means: corvée duty again. You were hoping to finish clearing stones from your own field today, but when the Lord calls you, go. Ignoring it would mean a fine or worse. You pull on your tunic, still smelling faintly of smoke, and gulp down a few mouthfuls of yesterday's bread before stepping out into the cold. The men gather in the lane, a ragged line of faces you've known your whole life. Thomas is there, rubbing his hands together for warmth. Old Robert leans on his staff, muttering about how his knees aren't what they used to be. The bailiff is already mounted, calling out the tasks. Some will go to mend the road to the manor, others to carry timber from the forest. You're assigned to the ditching crew digging along the Lord's fields to improve drainage before the spring rains. The tools are simple wooden-handled shovels with iron blades, picks worn thin, and a few wheelbarrows that creak under any real load. You shoulder your shovel and follow the others to the edge of the domain. The soil is frozen in places, slick and muddy in others. Your first stroke jars your shoulders as the blade bites into the ground, and you work steadily, the rhythm of lift, and throw, until the ache in your arms becomes just another part of you. The ditching is hard work, but the talk among the men helps the time pass. Thomas tells a story about a fox stealing a chicken from his yard, and you all laugh because you know the chase that follows barefoot in the dark, swearing under your breath while the fox vanishes into the hedgerow. Someone else mutters about the taxes coming due for the bridge repairs 2 villages over. Even when it's not your bridge, you'll pay for it. That's how it works. The Lord's needs ripple outward until they lap at your own hearth. By midday, the clouds have thickened, and the air smells of snow. The bailiff allows a short pause for food, and you hunker down with your back to the wind. Bread again, and a cold onion eaten in silence while you watch your breath curl into the gray sky. Your hands are stiff and the skin at your knuckles is cracked and sore. You flex them before taking up the shovel again. In the afternoon, the snow begins in earnest, fine, dry flakes at first, then heavier wet ones that cling to your cloak and hair. The ground turns slick underfoot, making every step toward the spoil heap more treacherous. The ditch deepens slowly, the walls uneven, but good enough to please the bailiff when he rides by for inspection. He nods once, says nothing, and moves on. It's the closest thing to praise you'll get today. When the day's labor is finally called to an end, you're soaked through and aching from head to toe. You tramp back toward the village with the others, boots squelching in the slush. The air smells faintly of wood smoke from the huts ahead, and that smell pulls you onward like a rope. Your wife meets you at the door, a worried look in her eyes when she sees how wet you are. She helps you strip off your outer garments and hangs them near the hearth, then sets a bowl of hot broth in front of you. The broth is thin water herbs and a scrap of root vegetable, but the heat spreads through you like a blessing. You eat slowly, savoring each mouthful. The children crowd close, chattering about a traveling minstrel who passed through earlier in the day. He played a lute and sang of knights and ladies of far-off lands where the streets are paved with gold. You smile at their wide eyes, though you know the gold in those songs is as real as summer snow. Later, when the children are asleep, you sit by the fire and mend a tear in your cloak. Your wife works beside you, repairing a hole in the goat's harness. The quiet is companionable, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the occasional hiss when sap in the wood meets the heat. Outside, the snow has stopped and the world is muffled under its new white coat. Before bed, you step outside for a moment, just to breathe the cold air. The moon is high, casting pale light over the fields and the frozen lane. The snow crunches under your feet, and you can see the fresh tracks of a fox heading toward the forest. You stand there for a long moment, letting the stillness wrap around you before you turn back inside. You know tomorrow will bring more work, more demands, more of the same, but for now you take this quiet as if it were a gift. The morning air is sharp enough to wake you fully before your eyes even open. The frost has crept across the inside of the thatch overnight, dusting the rafters above your head with a white rim. You sit up slowly, feeling the stiffness in your shoulders from yesterday's ditch work. Your wife is already moving quietly about the room, stirring the embers into a small flame. She hands you a piece of bread spread with a smear of goose fat, rare enough to make you pause and savor it before you chew. Today's work is at the mill. The village's grain needs grinding, and it's your turn to carry your share to the miller. You tie up 2 sacks, one of barley, one of rye, and sling them across your back. They're heavy cutting into your shoulders, but you fall into a steady pace along the frozen lane. The mill stands at the far edge of the village, its great wooden wheel still for now, the boards dusted with frost. The miller greets you with a nod, his hands already dusted white from flour. Inside, the air smells of grain and wood smoke. The grindstones turn with a deep, steady hum once the water gate is opened, and you watch the grain pour between them, the fine powder spilling into bins below. It's mesmerizing, almost soothing, until you remember that a portion of this flour will go to the miller as payment, and another to the Lord as rent. What's left will feed your family if you're careful. You shift from foot to foot, warming your hands over the brazier in the corner while you wait. As you stand there, another villager arrives, a young man from 2 fields over. He's talking about the rumor of a bad sickness in the next shire. Some say it's just winter fever. Others whisper of something worse, the kind of sickness that can empty a house in a week. You listen without comment. Fear spreads faster than truth, and you've learned not to let either run too far ahead. By mid-morning, your sacks are filled with flour, lighter than when you came, but still a burden to carry. You hoist them up and head home, the cold biting at your ears. The road passes the churchyard, where the stones stand crooked in the frozen ground. A fresh mound of earth near the wall catches your eye. You don't need to ask who, it's enough to know someone's hearth is colder now. Back home, your wife takes the flour and stores it carefully in the loft, away from damp and mice. The smell of baking bread already fills the hut, and for a moment, you allow yourself to imagine the soft, warm loaf that will come from it. But first, there's work to be done. The afternoon is for coppicing in the woodland. It's allowed. This part of the forest belongs to the village, and the wood you cut will serve as kindling for the rest of winter. You take your small hand axe and join Thomas, who is already hacking at a young hazel. The crack of splitting wood echoes in the still air. You work steadily, stripping branches and bundling them with twisted cord. The bundles grow quickly, and soon your shoulders ache under their weight. As you work, you talk about small things, the weather, the goat that got loose last week, the odd traveler who stopped in the alehouse and paid with a silver penny no one had seen before. In a world where most days are a copy of the one before, even a traveler's coin can seem like a relic from another life. By the time the sun dips low, the bundles are stacked high. You and Thomas divide them evenly, each taking what you can carry. The walk back is slow, the weight pressing down with every step. But the thought of a warm fire waiting at home keeps your feet moving. That night, the hut glows with the light of the hearth. The children sit close to the flames, turning their hands to the heat. Your wife ladles out thick pottage, and you eat with the hunger of a man who has worked hard enough to earn it. The wood you brought in leans against the wall, a small but visible promise against the cold. Later, you mend a broken bucket handle, while your wife hums softly over her sewing. Outside, the night is silent except for the occasional creak of the timbers in the frost. You think about the day's work, the sacks of flour now safe in the loft, and the wood stacked neatly against the wall. These are small victories, but they're yours, carved out of the narrow space the world allows you. When you finally lie down, the straw rustles beneath you, and the warmth of the fire lingers faintly in the air. You close your eyes knowing tomorrow will demand just as much, and that you'll give it because here you have no choice. The frost is still on the ground when the church bell calls the village to gather. It's not a feast day or a holy day. This is the manor's summons. You step out into the lane with your cloak pulled tight, following the slow stream of neighbors toward the open space by the church. The reeve stands there with the bailiff, a rolled parchment in his hand, and you can feel the mood in the air before the words are even read. There's talk of new levies, labor, and goods owed to the Lord before spring planting begins. You stand shoulder to shoulder with Thomas and Robert, listening as the reeve calls out each man's name followed by the task assigned. Some will mend the palisade around the manor house. Others will carry stone from the quarry for the church's repairs. Your name comes with the order to work on the Lord's sheep pens, mending the wattles, clearing the muck, and making them ready for lambing season. You nod when your name is called. Anything more would only draw the wrong kind of attention. The walk to the pens takes you past the manor orchard, bare now, but still surrounded by a fence you're not allowed to cross. Even fallen fruit belongs to the Lord, and you've seen men fined for pocketing a single apple. The pens are another reminder of the same rule: the best land, the best animals, the best of everything is kept close to the manor while you tend what's left. You start by clearing the filth from the pens, shoveling the matted straw and dung into piles to be carted away later. The smell is sharp enough to make your eyes water, but you work steadily, the shovel biting into the frozen muck. The other men work in silence, each wrapped in his own thoughts, until the bailiff makes his round. He watches you for a long moment, eyes narrowing slightly, then moves on without a word. That's as close to approval as you're likely to get. By midday, your hands are stiff and your back aches from the constant bending. You step outside the pen for a breath of cleaner air, leaning on your shovel, while the cold wind cuts through your cloak. Thomas joins you, passing a crust of bread from his pocket. You break it in half and chew in silence, watching the pale winter sun struggle behind the clouds. The afternoon is spent weaving fresh wattle into the gaps in the pen walls. It's slow, fiddly work. Each branch has to be twisted and threaded just right, or it will snap. Your fingers grow numb, and more than once you have to stop to rub them back to life. The wind shifts, bringing with it the smell of wood smoke from the village, and for a moment you think of the fire waiting at home. When the day's labor is finally done, the bailiff inspects the work. He gives a single nod and dismisses you, and you join the small group of men trudging back down the lane. The light is fading, and the first flakes of snow begin to fall, catching in your hair and cloak. By the time you reach your hut, the ground is dusted white. Inside, the warmth of the hearth greets you like an old friend. Your wife has set a pot of broth to simmer, and the smell fills the small room. The children are huddled together, whispering about a story. The priest told them something about a saint who fed the poor with a single loaf of bread. You smile faintly at the thought, knowing that in your world, miracles are more often counted in handfuls of grain than in grand gestures. After supper, you sit on the bench and sharpen your knife. The rhythm of stone on steel is soothing, and you let your mind drift. Outside, the snow falls thicker now, muting the sounds of the village. You know that tomorrow the fields and lanes will be harder to cross, the work slower, but the demands will be the same. Before bed, you step outside and look up at the sky. The moon is hidden, but the snow reflects what little light there is, casting a faint glow over the world. The air is still the kind of stillness that makes you feel both small and rooted. You pull your cloak tighter and head back in, ready to face another day in the life you've always known. The snow lies thick on the ground when you wake, softening every edge of the village into a white hush. Your breath hangs in the air, even inside the hut, the fire having burned low in the night. You pull yourself from the warmth of the straw bed, wrap your cloak tight, and kneel by the hearth to coax the embers back to life. The wood catches slowly, sending up a thin column of smoke that curls into the rafters. Your wife stirs behind you, the children still bundled together beneath the rough wool blanket. Today's task is one you've been putting off, fetching water from the stream beyond the village. The well is fine for most days, but the stream water is better for washing clothes and brewing ale, and your wife has been asking for it since before the snow. You take 2 wooden buckets, their iron handles cold against your palms, and step into the lane. The snow squeaks under your feet, and each step leaves a deep print. The walk to the stream is quiet, the village still half asleep. Here and there, thin plumes of smoke rise from chimneys, and the only sound is the muffled thud of your boots. You pass the churchyard, the headstones capped with white, and the small chapel door closed against the cold. Beyond the village, the land opens into fields now lying under their winter cover, the furrows hidden but not forgotten. The stream is narrow but quick-moving, the surface rippling dark against the snow-covered banks. You break a thin film of ice at the edge, kneel, and fill the buckets one at a time. The water is so cold it bites at your skin, making your fingers ache. When both buckets are full, you lift them carefully, balanced but heavy, and begin the slow walk back. Each step sends a faint slosh over the rim, and by the time you reach the hut, the tops of your boots are wet. Your wife takes the water with a nod, setting it aside for later. The children are awake now, their cheeks pink from the cold. You share a quick meal of bread and boiled beans, then pull on your gloves for the real work of the day, repairing the roof. The corner that's been dripping during heavy rains is worse after the snow, and if you don't fix it, the thaw will bring water down in sheets. Climbing onto the roof is tricky, the thatch slippery under your boots. You work slowly, pulling away the old, rotted bundles and replacing them with fresh straw tied tight with twine. The smell of the straw is almost sweet, a rare contrast to the usual scents of smoke and damp earth. Your hands go numb more than once, and you stop to breathe warmth back into your fingers before continuing. Below, your wife looks up occasionally, checking that you're steady. By midday, the work is done. You climb down, stamping snow from your boots, and go inside to warm yourself by the fire. The rest of the afternoon is for mending tools, a cracked rake handle, a worn hoe, the leather harness for the oxen. Each repair is small, but each one is necessary. A broken tool at the wrong time could mean days of lost work, and lost work means less to eat when winter comes again. As the sun dips low, the sky turns a pale gold, casting long shadows over the snow. You take a walk to the edge of the village, checking the fence around your small plot of land. It's still holding, though a few posts will need replacing come spring. The air is sharp and still, the kind that makes your breath sound loud in your own ears. That night, after a simple meal, you sit by the fire with your family. The children play a game with pebbles on the floor, your wife sewing by the flickering light. You listen to the quiet, no wind tonight, no dogs barking in the distance, just the soft crackle of the fire. Outside, the snow reflects the starlight, making the night brighter than usual. You know that tomorrow will bring another round of labor, maybe in the fields if the weather holds, maybe mending the road, if the Lord's men call again. But for now, you let yourself rest in the warmth of the hearth, your cloak wrapped around your shoulders, the knowledge of a roof repaired and tools mended, settling in your chest like a small, steady flame. The wind is already up when you step outside the next morning, carrying with it the fine, dry sting of blown snow. The sky is a flat sheet of gray, the kind that gives no clue about when or if the weather will change. You pull your hood close around your face and head toward the Lord's domain, because today is one of the fixed days for plowing his fallow strips. The oxen are already there when you arrive, their hides dusted white, their breath steaming in the cold air. You join the other men at the edge of the field, each taking a turn with the plow. The ground here is better than your own richer, darker soil, carefully kept. It turns under the blade more easily, and for a moment you let yourself enjoy the feel of the furrow slicing clean through. But this isn't your harvest, and the work is for the Lord's stores, not your family's table. That knowledge sits in your chest like a stone. The bailiff rides past on his horse, his cloak snapping in the wind. He says nothing, but you can feel his gaze measuring the straightness of your furrow, the steadiness of your pace. You keep your eyes down, focusing on the oxen's slow, steady steps, guiding the plow with both hands. The cold bites at your fingers through your gloves, and the wind finds its way down the back of your neck. By mid-morning, your shoulders are sore, your arms aching from holding the plow steady against the jolts of hidden stones. You switch with Thomas, who takes the reins while you walk alongside, clearing clumps of turned earth from the blade. The two of you speak little. The wind steals your words before they can settle between you. When the sun briefly breaks through the clouds, it's a pale coin of light that offers no warmth. The midday meal is taken in the lee of a hedgerow, bread that cracks under your teeth, a wedge of hard cheese, and a swallow of ale. You chew slowly, not for the taste, but to make the small portion last. The men talk quietly about the weather, wondering if the snow will hold off long enough to finish the work. You keep your thoughts to yourself. In the afternoon, the wind shifts, bringing with it the smell of smoke from the village. It's a faint reminder of warmth, but here in the open field it feels very far away. You keep your head down and push through the last stretch, the oxen's hooves sinking into the softening soil where the frost has given way. When the bailiff finally calls an end, you can feel the ache in every part of your body. The walk back to the village is slow, each man carrying his own weight of exhaustion. The snow has started again, light but steady, and by the time you reach your hut, it has begun to cling to your cloak. Inside, the fire is going, and the sight of it pulls you forward like a rope. Your wife hands you a cup of hot broth, and you drink it down in a few gulps, the warmth spreading through you like sunlight. That evening, the children are lively, playing a game that involves chasing each other around the hut. Their laughter fills the space, a small shield against the cold, pressing at the walls. You sit on the bench, letting the sound wash over you, mending a tear in your gloves by the firelight. Before bed, you step outside for a moment, drawn by the quiet. The village is still, the snow softening every sound, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. You breathe in the cold air and feel the ache in your muscles settle deeper, a reminder of the day's labor and the days still to come. You turn back inside knowing that tomorrow will ask just as much of you, and you'll give it because here there is no other way. The morning comes with a muffled stillness, the kind that follows a heavy night of snow. When you push open the door, the lane is blanketed white from fence to fence, every rut and footprint erased. The air bites harder than usual, the kind of cold that makes your teeth ache when you breathe. You wrap your cloak tighter and pull on your gloves, already thinking about the day's work, clearing snow from the paths between huts and from the road to the church. A task no one wants, but everyone needs. You join the other men at the edge of the green, each armed with a shovel or a wide board to push the snow aside. The work starts slow snow. This deep is heavy, and the top layer hides patches of ice underneath. You bend, scoop, throw. Bend, scoop, throw. The motion becomes a rhythm, though your shoulders begin to burn before the first hour has passed. Children trail along the edges of the cleared path, rolling snow into lopsided balls, their laughter mixing with the scrape of shovels. By the time the path to the church is cleared, your breath is coming in thick clouds. The bell tolls once and you step inside for warmth, standing near the back, as the priest says a short prayer for the village. His words are about endurance, about God's provision, even in the leanest of seasons. You bow your head with the others, not because you believe every word, but because the ritual itself feels like a kind of shelter. When you return home, your wife has a task ready, helping her carry a load of laundry to the stream. The snow makes the going slower, and your boots sink with every step. At the bank, you break the ice with a stick, the crack echoing across fields. She kneels at the water's edge, scrubbing linen against a smooth stone while you keep watch for anyone who might pass by. The cold water turns her hands red, and you take over for a while so she can warm them under her cloak. Back at the hut, the wet clothes are hung on a line strung near the fire. They steam faintly as the warmth works on them, the scent of wood smoke clinging to the damp fabric. You eat a simple midday meal, barley bread and onion soup, before turning to the next task, checking the animal pens. The snow has drifted high against the fences, and in some places the weight has pushed them inward. You stamp down the snow, clearing a space so the goats and chickens can move without getting trapped. In the afternoon, you make a trip to the store loft to take stock of what's left. The sight makes your stomach tighten, sacks of grain lower than you'd like, only a few strips of dried meat and root vegetables beginning to soften. You do the silent math in your head, how many days until planting, how many meals you can stretch if you keep the portions small. You know others are doing the same in their own huts. By evening, the sky has turned a bruised purple, and the air has the sharpness that means more snow is coming. You bring in extra wood for the fire and help your wife bank the embers so they'll last the night. The children sit close, one of them curled against your side, the other drawing shapes in the ash on the hearthstone. Before bed, you step outside into the deepening dark. The snow crunches under your feet, and your breath rises in a slow stream. The village is quiet, the only sound the faint creak of the church's weather vane turning in the wind. You stand there for a moment, letting the cold settle into you, then turn back inside. Tomorrow will bring the same labor cold and the slow, steady march toward spring. And you will meet it as you always do, with work-worn hands and the stubborn will to endure. The wind has shifted overnight, and by morning it's coming hard from the east, driving fine snow into every crack and seam. You wake to find a thin drift on the inside sill where the door meets the frame. The fire is barely holding on the embers buried under gray ash, so you stir them back to life and feed them with kindling until a small flame curls upward. The children burrow deeper under the blanket, and your wife wraps herself in her cloak before tending to the pot from last night's meal. Today, the Lord's men have called for hauling timber from the common woodland to the manor. You sling your axe across your shoulder and join the others in the lane, boots crunching through crusted snow. The air is dry and sharp enough to catch in your throat when you breathe too fast. The forest looms dark against the white fields, the bare branches creaking in the wind. Once among the trees, the work begins quickly. You and Thomas are set to felling small pines, the kind that can be stripped and used for repairs or firewood in the manor kitchens. The axe head bites into the wood with a dull thud, the chips scattering at your feet. After several swings, the tree leans, groans, and then falls with a sound that echoes far in the still air. You trim the branches with steady strokes, stacking them in neat piles, while others begin dragging the trunks toward the track. The hauling is the worst of it. Ropes dig into your shoulders as you and two others drag each log through the snow. The ground beneath is uneven, the ruts hidden, and more than once you stumble, catching yourself just before you fall. The sweat freezes on your skin even as your breath comes fast and hard. By midday, the path from the forest to the manor yard is packed with footprints and the grooves of the logs. You stop to drink from a leather flask, the water inside half frozen. Your hands are stiff, your fingers slow to respond when you flex them. Thomas grins through chapped lips and mutters that at least the snow makes the logs slide easier. You grunt in agreement, though the weight is still punishing. In the manor yard, the steward watches the timber being stacked. He marks something on his parchment each time a load is delivered, barely glancing at the men doing the work. You and the others turn back for another trip, knowing that the sooner the piles are high enough, the sooner you'll be sent home. By late afternoon, the light is fading, and the wind has a deeper bite. The last log is delivered, and the bailiff gives a curt nod dismissal without thanks. You trudge back toward the village, every muscle aching, your cloak heavy with snow that has melted and frozen again. At home, your wife meets you with a bowl of hot broth richer than usual. She must have found a bone with a bit of meat still clinging to it. You sit by the fire, warming your hands on the bowl, letting the heat soak back into you. The children chatter about footprints they saw near the garden, too big for a fox, too small for a deer. You promise to look in the morning. Later, after the meal, you check the axe head, tightening the binding and running your thumb along the edge. It will hold for a while longer, though the steel is wearing thin. You make a note in your mind to speak with the smith when you can spare something to trade. Before bed, you step outside one last time. The moon is high, turning the snow to silver, and your breath rises in slow plumes. The village sleeps, each hut a small mound under the white. You stand there in the stillness, feeling the ache in your arms, the sting in your hands, and the stubborn truth that tomorrow will demand the same strength all over again. And you will give it because you must. The day begins with the low toll of the church bell, its sound rolling through the cold air. It isn't Sunday, which means it's a summons, something the reeve or bailiff wants done immediately. You step into the lane, breath clouding in the frosty light, and join the stream of villagers heading toward the green. The reeve is already there, his cloak pulled tight, reading from a scrap of parchment. The Lord's pigeons have been raided, and tracks in the snow lead toward the far edge of the village. Someone has to repair the dovecote and set new measures to keep out thieves and animals. Your name is called along with a handful of others. The dovecote sits in the manor's outer yard, a tall, weathered structure of stone and timber with dozens of small, arched openings. Inside, the cooing of the birds is a constant muffled sound, and the smell is heavy straw droppings and the sharp tang of feathers. The bailiff points out gaps in the timber and spots where snow has piled into the entry ledges, telling you in clipped words what needs fixing. You begin by clearing the snow and muck from the ledges, brushing it away with gloved hands that quickly grow wet and numb. Then comes the heavier work, replacing warped planks, hammering them into place with nails scavenged from the manor's store. The wood is stiff with cold, and each strike of the hammer sends a jolt up your arm. The pigeons flutter and shift above you, watching with bright, unblinking eyes. By mid-morning, the repairs are underway in earnest. Thomas works beside you, driving nails while you hold the planks steady. You exchange few words. The cold makes conversation feel like an effort. From the manor house, a kitchen servant passes by, carrying a basket covered with cloth. The smell of fresh bread drifts after her, warm and maddening. You follow it with your eyes until she disappears around the corner. When the main structure is mended, the bailiff orders you to shovel fresh straw into the base and clean out the old. You work in the half-light, inside the sound of the pigeons close around you, wings brushing against your shoulder as they shift and settle. The new straw smells faintly of summer fields, and for a moment, it lifts you away from the frozen yard to a memory of warm days. The midday break is brief, just enough time to eat a crust of bread and a piece of dried apple you brought from home. You hunch against the dovecote wall, shielding yourself from the wind. Across the yard, other men are at work repairing a cartwheel, their breath rising in clouds as they bend over the spokes. The manor hums with winter tasks, each one a piece in the machinery that keeps it running while the fields lie fallow. In the afternoon, you're sent to dig a shallow trench along the base of the dovecote to drain meltwater when the thaw comes. The ground is stubborn, half frozen, and the spade rings against hidden stones. You chip away at it steadily, your back aching with the effort. The bailiff checks the work once grunts and moves on another silent approval. When the day's work ends, the pigeons are settling for the night, the sky above the manor streaked with the last orange of sunset. You trudge back toward the village, your gloves stiff with cold, your shoulders sore from hammering and digging. At home, the fire is already burning, and the smell of cabbage and herbs greets you as you duck inside. Your wife has mended a tear in your cloak, the stitches neat and strong. You take your place on the bench, cradling a bowl of hot stew in your hands, the warmth leaching into your fingers. The children chatter about tracks they found near the fence, maybe a hare, maybe something larger. You listen, letting their voices fill the space between the day's labor and the night's rest. Later, after the meal, you sharpen the spade's edge, running the whetstone in slow, steady strokes. The repetition is calming the scrape of stone on metal, a sound you've known since boyhood. When the tool is ready, you set it aside, bank the fire, and step outside one last time. The village lies quiet under the thin moon, the snow glinting faintly in its light. You pull your cloak close and breathe in the cold air, feeling the weight of another day's work in your bones. Tomorrow will bring something else, another summons, another task, another piece of labor that keeps the world moving in its slow, unchanging rhythm. You turn back to the hut, ready to meet it when it comes. The morning begins with a sky the color of iron and a silence that feels heavy on your shoulders. You wake to the sound of your own breath in the cold air, the faint crackle of embers struggling in the hearth. Your wife is already up, coaxing the fire back to life while the children huddle close under the blanket. You rise slowly, your back tight from days of labor, and pull on your cloak. Today will be your own work, not the Lord's, a chance to tend your field, though it's as much necessity as it is reprieve. You start with the fence along the edge of your plot. The winter winds have loosened some of the posts, and a heavy drift leans against one corner. You take the spade and dig out the snow, stamping it down away from the fence. The posts creak when you push against them, but they hold. In a few places you wedge stones at their base to keep them steady until you can replace them in spring. The work is quiet, the only sound the crunch of snow and the scrape of your spade. By mid-morning you turn your attention to the stored grain in your loft. You climb the ladder carefully, testing each rung before you put your weight on it. The sacks are there, but lighter than you'd like. You run your hands over them, checking for damp or signs of mice. Finding none is a small relief, though you know the weeks ahead will thin them even further. You measure out what you can spare for the next few days and bring it down, the smell of the grain warm and earthy in your hands. Your wife uses some of it for the midday meal, barley bread dense and dark with a pot of thickened broth made from cabbage leeks and the last of the dried beans. You eat slowly, stretching the moment of warmth in your stomach before heading out again. The afternoon is for mending your hoe handle, a patch on the roof where the thatch has thinned the leather strap that holds the oxen's yoke. Each repair is a reminder of how much you depend on these simple things. A broken handle in planting season could mean losing a day you can't spare. A gap in the roof could mean water on the grain stores. You work steadily, your hands moving with the practiced ease of someone who's done this his whole life. Later, you carry a bundle of kindling into the hut, stacking it neatly by the hearth. The children are sitting close to the fire, turning small sticks in the coals to watch them blacken. Your wife hums as she works a length of cloth in her lap, the needle flashing in the firelight. The sound of the wind outside is steady but not strong, and for once you allow yourself to believe the night will be calm. As darkness falls, you step outside to look over the village. The snow reflects what little light remains, and you can see the shapes of your neighbors moving about, closing shutters, bringing in wood, calling children inside. You know each face, each voice, each hand that works the same hard soil you do. You think about how all of you are bound together here not by choice but by the same narrow stretch of land, the same set of rules, the same fight to see another spring. When you go back inside, the fire is burning low but steady. You sit down beside it, feeling the ache in your arms ease into a dull throb. The smell of the evening meal drifts from the pot, and the warmth from the flames settles into your bones. You know that tomorrow will come as it always does, demanding work, endurance, and the quiet acceptance that this is your life. And still, as you close your eyes, you hold on to the stubborn belief that surviving it all is its own kind of victory. And now, as the last embers in the hearth glow faintly, you let the weight of the day slip from your shoulders. The cold outside still presses against the walls, but in here the air is soft and warm, thick with the quiet of a sleeping village. You hear the slow breathing of your family, the faint creak of the timbers, the occasional pop from the fire. Every sound feels smaller, now muted, as if the whole world has drawn closer around you. You think about the day, about the fence posts you set straight, the grain you counted, the repairs you made. None of it was remarkable. None of it will be remembered beyond this winter. And yet these small acts keep your life in place just as surely as the stones in the wall hold back the wind. There's no glory in it, but there's a kind of dignity that no one can take from you. The snow outside has stopped. You imagine it lying untouched in the moonlight, smooth as linen, hiding the ruts and footprints of the day. Tomorrow those marks will return, yours among them, and the cycle will begin again. Work, eat, rest, and work again. But for now you are in the pause between. You close your eyes and picture the fields in spring, the furrows dark and ready, the air alive with the sound of birds. You picture the first shoots breaking through the soil, green and fragile but stubborn enough to rise. You picture yourself there, standing at the edge of the field, knowing you've carried your family this far. The warmth of the fire sinks deeper into you, and your breathing slows. The night holds steady, and in the quiet you let yourself drift.